John. Two beautiful, contrasting, complementary pieces of music this morning. I really appreciate that. We do. At the retreat, the tribal elder had just spoken, and you get your nerve up to ask him if he's up for a visit. He's most gracious. And the two of you sit down on an old wooden bench under that cottonwood tree. And you ask him questions about his traditions, and he responds lots of questions you ask. He senses your trepidation and tentativeness, but also feels your sincerity. And he stops you, and he says, "Do you see that tin shed over there?" And you imagine it belongs to the highway department, maybe housing tractors or trucks or something. That tin shed is kind of like my culture. We can sit back here on this wooden bench under the shade of this cottonwood, but it's not until you get off that bench and go inside. I'll go with you. I'll help you. I'll be with you. But you've got to go inside and feel it. Feel the humidity, the heat, whatever's in there. And try to see from looking in outward. Try to see from inside out. Inside out. Feel it. And when you come out, what are you going to do with that which has been given you? He says these things, and he also concludes by the way, next week there's a powwow in the Kibbie Dome. You arrive and sit high in the bleachers, far away from the dance floor, high above. The grand entry has begun, led by veterans, American, Canadian flags, but leading the way is the eagle staff with eagle feathers, a curved staff. Everyone in order falling behind as they counterclockwise in the Kibbie Dome, where there had been basketball and rock concerts. Now those lead the way, pave the way, clean the way to transform that space into home. Led by the veterans, the elders following, the elders, finally the fancy dancers, the shawl dancers, the jingle dancers, and the kids in the end. Everyone entering. And you see people smiling with handshakes exchanged, feeling at home. Remember that elder saying, "Do you see that tin shed?" The elder could have stopped in mid-sentence and said, "Well, this is enough," and walked away, but instead continued the conversation, actually turning the questions on to you. Do you see it? Pointing the way to a door. In so doing, the elder, in essence, is acknowledging his offering permission to you to enter. Acknowledging his sovereignty as a host, you as a guest in his home. If the door is opened and you're invited in, what will you do? Can you get off the bleachers and walk down and visit with that grandmother and her grandkids? See them there, just on the side of the dance arena. Can you strike up a conversation, ask questions, and in so doing, show respect and do some deep listening? The grandmother may elect to continue the conversation, may ask questions of you, you of her. She just might open a door. Don't enter the home of another without permission. Don't be an eye juggler. Remember the elder saying, "I'll come with you." It's so easy to stumble or even get lost without a guide. With a guide, you learn basic etiquette. With a guide, maybe, just maybe, the directions to the interior will become clear. We need to get off the security of our own benches, our own perspective, and travel in collaboration with those into a reality unknown. Their grandmother can explain and lead the way if she's willing. Let her be your guide. Don't enter without the host walking with you. Don't be an eye juggler. Remember him saying, feel it, see it from the inside looking out, while traveling in the tin shed and doing some deep listening and soft walking with a lot of empathy. Can you begin to understand and appreciate the Native perspective? Can you also acknowledge what is revealed? There's so much experience that can be revealed. There's a couple that I'd like to point out. One of those, with deep listening, are the wounds. In all our communities, there are far too many wounded people. For the American Indian, we must acknowledge the particular wounds of historic trauma, of disease and population extinction, of missionary impositions in boarding schools with its own sex abuse, by wars and military defeat, by reservations and allotment, by the continuous sexual abuse inflicted upon Native women today, and the continuation of stereotypes and prejudices experienced today, all leading to an estrangement from home. The wounds for many, as we experience that world, have healed, but the scars are still so visible. For others, the wounds are still open and festering, and for new generations, wounds are yet inflicted. But revealed also is resilience. Despite the assimilation and genocide, deep within the bones reside a resilience. We must also acknowledge the continuation of tradition and the ongoing revitalizations. One expression of this resilience, I think you probably saw it on your way in, is a certain teepee. And thank you, Patricia and Pat, for helping set it up, because without their help, it would not have happened this morning. It was cold, but we persevered. That teepee represents so much of Native peoples today. It is a symbol and emblem of so much. And in particular, I ask that when you leave the service today, you actually go inside if you can. Spend a moment inside. There's a lot of space, surprisingly. And just pause and feel that space. And look up, and you'll see some of the poles. There's 4 in particular that are tied. We had to tie it 3 times, trial and error, but it worked finally on the 3rd time. And you'll see all those poles together. That's what the Nimipu call tewa. That's the bundling of the poles. Imagine each pole like an individual, distinct onto itself, but coming together to create that bundle that's tight and supportive of each other. And when the winds blow strong, it's always the teepee that stands the tallest. As that wind blows, that teepee hugs the earth even more so. Sorry. In that interdependence of each distinct pole, each distinct person, together that teepee the people will stand the strong winds of prejudice and oppression from the dominant society. Also revealed, in all honesty, is something closer to home. In listening carefully, deeply, comes a listening within, comes reflection, right? And with it comes an acknowledgement of our white ancestors and what they did and what we still do. While the deep listening should hopefully let go of any feeling of guilt, because pity helps no one, that deep reflection should also reveal our white privilege today and the need to acknowledge it. So if we're to be respectful in entering the home of someone else, we must take responsibility for our privilege, adjust it, modify it, acknowledge our own baggage, and do something about it. So when that MC at the Pow Wow invites everyone down for an intertribal, now this is not a fancy dance, this is not a competition, intertribal, when everyone's invited down, that means you. Are you able to get off the bleachers, off your wooden bench of your own security, and go down there in that intertribal and dance with others? It may not be easy. The dance step may not come easy, but take soft steps. By participating, walking softly, listening deeply, you can begin to feel the heartbeat of the drum. You can begin to feel the heartbeat of the Indian. You can begin to feel the wounds, but also the resilience, and maybe a little bit of your own privilege. Don't be ethnocentric. Don't be an. And you remember the elder asking, when you come out of there, what have you been giving? What are you going to do with that? How are you going to be a good ally? How are you going to build bridges of respectful relationships of reciprocity? In all my years of being with Native peoples, there's one dominant, what the Sichums call teaching, MIP, that pervades everywhere. And it's expressed in the Nimipu word, tika, as with food, to share with someone in need, without thought of return or what's in it for me, unselfishly sharing with those in need. Seek cultural appreciation and do some gift giving. No cultural appropriation. There's been too much taking. Isn't it the case that to effectively share with others, one must do some deep listening? In essence, what the Sichums call sukum wach milks. Sukum wach milks. Their word for empathy. The ability to really pay attention and to feel what your neighbor's feeling, his or her condition. Offer the grandmother a refreshment. Offer whatever comes to your heart. Perhaps the greatest gift of all is simply listening deeply to a voice too often ignored and dismissed. Don't be self-serving. Don't be an eye juggler. To be an ally, a true guest in the home of our host, seek to build respectful relationships of reciprocity. Take time, be patient, walk softly, listen carefully. I think the key really is to be an authentic human self, to be a human being. Don't be. Got a hymn, number 325, Love Makes